Welcome to Purple Elephant Radio, where we discuss the mindsets, philosophies, and strategies needed to make art and tell stories that make a dent in this era of abundance. This is a show for the unbound creative, the undefinable artists, and the unidentified philosophers. I'm your host, Sean Green. Welcome to the first ever video episode of Purple Elephant Radio. I tried to do this yesterday and I filmed the whole episode and my face was out of focus the whole time. So hopefully if you're seeing this right now, it means my autofocus is actually turned on. And yeah, it's definitely been a little bit of a hurdle to get this going. The video specifically. But obviously I haven't been posting the podcast or really posting any content at all as of the past couple months. There's a lot of reasons for that. I'm working on a new book, which I will talk about at some point soon, but I don't really want to say anything until it's actually finished. But in this episode, I kind of wanted to, really reflect on the fact of why am I sitting down to film this now? Why have I finally set up the video camera setup after months and months and months of saying I wanted a podcast studio area and never doing it? Now, I think the main thing that kind of changed recently, I just got back from a vacation, and I think that always kind of shuffles up my daily habits and kind of made this change a little bit easier. But at the same time, I think something much deeper has kind of shifted for me when it comes to not just my creative process, but I guess you could say the whole of content creation. Not just creating new stuff, but also the sharing and posting of it. Namely, where I'm getting the joy out of making stuff. I think the best place to start is kind of looking at the whole arc of Purple Elephant in a 60 seconds or less overview. Because really it started with making short films, entirely for fun with no thought of who's going to see this or what's going to come of this or am I going to submit it to film festivals, none of that. It just started with making, at first, some sketch comedy-based videos and a little bit more dramatic as time went on, but there were the short films with no intention of what I want to see come out of it. And somewhere along the line, it evolved into, now I want to start writing a blog. And now I want to start making these videos called Purple Elephant Thought videos, which is sort of like this, I wouldn't even call it philosophy. I'd call it pseudo self-help 5 minutes to 10-minute videos where I kind of just riffed on a topic. Kind of like what I'm doing now. I like to think this is a little bit more professional. I know a little bit more about filming and editing, but there was the arc from that, which included the podcast, which included the blogs, and that was kind of the crescendo of doing a daily blog. I tried to get a newsletter kicked off. I tried to start some type of mastermind group where people were going to pay me a certain monthly amount and we'd all get together and talk about creative ideas. The ambition was there. And obviously, or I guess not obviously, a lot of it didn't pan out. Because if it did pan out, you probably would have heard me talking about it more. And I think there was the time when I was working on the Purple Elephant Artist book, which basically combined all these blog posts, added in a ton of art, but really I kind of took a hiatus from posting anything, just working on the book. In that time, that was kind of when I realized, okay, I'm trying to do too many things at once. And because I'm trying to do too many things at once, nothing is getting my full attention. Nothing is really standing out. And I feel like I have made multiple videos or multiple podcast episodes talking about, prioritization. Okay, what's the most important thing? What's the next most important thing? But there was always that aspect or hidden within that, implied within that, all these things need to be done. Whatever is on my mind, that's the thing I'm going to achieve. And I will just say it was because I had been for the longest time so into the personal development, self-improvement, philosophy books and podcasts and all that stuff. And at least recently as in the past 6 months, I don't really care about that stuff anymore. And again, I'll probably get into more on why that is, but not right now. But just finishing off the arc, created the book. I had another kind of jump start of doing a ton more content, podcast, Instagram post, and it sort of, I don't want to say fizzled out, but I guess you could say comfortably reduced the workload. I did it intentionally. And really the only thing that remained was making the short films, the place it started with. And in looking at least the past 3 or 4 short films that I've made, I mean, not only are they, in my opinion, the best quality-wise, but also the best story-wise that I've made. The most what I would consider original. And I remember when I was working on the blog, a lot of the stuff I was talking about was kind of this circle around how do you be original? How do you be creative? This talking about creativity rather than actually doing the thing. And I always kind of knew that in the back of my mind that, you know, the person who, you know, as an analogy, the person who's always making videos about reviewing videography equipment, they're not making short films. They're not telling stories. They're not really expressing themselves creatively. But for myself, obviously, I was taking the ultra meta position of, let me talk about all these things, but talk about how do you talk about creativity, or how do you talk about public speaking. But it ended with the short films. And I say ended, but that's kind of where I'm currently at. The last thing I really shared about was the Fontanini movie. And I know I made a podcast episode kind of briefly talking about my thoughts on that, but then I've kind of gone ghost mode or gone silent, whatever the phrase for that is. And yeah, I've been working on a new book, which is poems and essays. And now I'm here. Now I'm filming the first ever episode of the video podcast of Purple Elephant Radio. And I don't necessarily know what will come of this. I'm no longer going to say, okay, I'm committing myself to 10 more weeks of daily or weekly episodes, or, you know, whatever it is. I'm not necessarily concerned about planning for the future of making content. And I think that's really what the big realization has been. So if you want to kind of visualize it, and now on video I can actually use my hands, it started with this purely self-expressive stuff, the short films, kind of crescendoed into this, I want to deliver a message, I want people to take notice of what I'm saying, I want more follows, more likes, and as it kind of grew, this egotistical thought of, I want to be an influential person, or an influencer. I don't like using that word, but I wanted to have some influence. And along that time, I also thought, I want to be so influential that I can sustain myself, you know, making enough money through ad revenue or sponsorships by doing this stuff. So basically, I want to sustain this and make money doing it. And that was kind of the peak. That was when I was most ambitious, when I was at least sharing the most work. And at that point, that's when it got the most tiring. When I was doing so much past the point of what was enjoyable, and it was almost like a compulsion of, I gotta do this because I committed to it. And I'm the most disciplined, creative person. I'm gonna keep producing, do a blog every day and a podcast every week and a short film every month. It just got to this ridiculous level. And it kind of fizzled out. And now that I'm here, I can kind of reflect on why that was. And I think this is really the core message. What's really important, if you yourself are watching this and you're a content creator or an artist, you don't necessarily have to be, you know, I don't really know how I distinguish the two, but however you define yourself, someone who is creating something, putting something out there for the world, if you're in that boat, I just want you to be at least aware of the distinction between making something from a self-expressive point of view versus making something because you believe it'll make you money. Or if not make you money, at least thinking that in the future something will come of this. Essentially, if you're familiar at all with the Bhagavad Gita quote, you have the right to the work, but not the fruits of the work. You have the right to the labor, but not the fruits of the action. And for myself, when I was at that peak workload, I had gotten obsessed with the fruits of the action. And just as a quick example of what that looked like for me, it was constantly going on the podcast app, checking every day, did the stream count go up? And thinking, there's been this 3-day where no one listened to it. I need to put something on my story again. And kind of getting obsessed with the gamification of views and listens and downloads and whatever other metrics I was looking at. And as obvious as it is, I don't think most people give it a second thought once they're in that, for lack of a better word, in that trap. The trap of the game of digital metrics, digital currency, I'll put it that way, which is not Bitcoin and Ethereum, but the digital currency of influence. Likes, follows, comments, listens, downloads, all that stuff. Ultimately, it does not matter. I mean, even if you are, really doing the thing, and you're 1,000 followers, you're 1,000 subscribers, and it's going up every day, and you're about to hit, going in the future, 10,000 subscribers, and wow, I can start monetizing these videos and getting ad revenue. That's not what's real. What's real is the thing that got you there in the first place. The joy of just creating for creating's sake. When I made those short films at the very start, I'm thinking of the one called Not High. That made me laugh out loud. The script, writing that, it was so much fun. Reading it with friends I felt like it was the funniest thing I had ever written in my whole life. And of course, there's an argument to be made that, once you get to a certain level, if you're a professional creative person, whether you're writing or making music or making films or making content, there is that point where you have to take it seriously. And you need to have a video every week and do these things because your audience expects stuff of you and they're the ones paying your bill. Yes, there's an argument to be made for that. But make room for the self-expressive work too. Because I think what I've realized, and especially as I talk more about this book in the coming weeks and months, there's a major distinction between short-term creation and long-term creation, between trend-based work and evergreen work. Because when you look at it, whatever, most people don't read books. There are books, though, that have stood the test of time for thousands of years. It's the books that, they're taught in classrooms, so you may have read it then, but work that, as I'm out of school, I've not lost my desire for reading. In fact, there wasn't really much reading in college for me, and that desire to read was kind of secondary or completely unrelated to school. But it's not just books, I should make that clear. There's a canon of work in any medium, whether it's film, literature, essay books, poetry, spiritual books, philosophy, music. There's a canon of that where, the goal as a creative doesn't have to be to get in that canon, to be, remembered past your death. I don't necessarily think that's the right way to go about creating. But I don't think that there's a harm in aiming to make evergreen work. Because really again, this is not the most original thought, but we're drowning in information. We're in a sea of information right now where a lot of people are talking just to talk. And I'm not going to deny the fact that maybe that's what I'm doing a little bit. Talking just to talk, to fill, a 20-minute podcast episode. But I ultimately think what my message that I'm trying to share, which, yes, I could share it in 60 seconds or less on a TikTok if I really wanted to, but I don't really want to. The message is the fact that when you stop caring about the views and those, phony digital metrics, or using them to gain, when you're no longer using them to gain self-esteem, there's this openness and almost childlike creative freedom when it comes to making any work. Even something as mundane as talking to a camera and making a podcast episode. Or it can be something as intricate as a feature film, or a crazy animated short. And yeah, maybe that's the stuff that's not going to be blowing up on YouTube. That's not going to be, because it's not sensationalized, because it isn't a clickbait video where the title captures people's attention, where it's not based on divisive politics. I still think it's worth making that work. I really, really do. And I think, from my little corner of the universe, the message going forward for not just the Purple Elephant Radio stuff, but anything else that I create is going to be basically, you have to get back to that original spot. The spot where you were creating for creating's sake. The intrinsic joy of creating. And I guess it is because of social media. I'm not saying that it didn't exist before, but I definitely think social media has intensified this belief or false equivalence that in finding our passion, we need to earn a living from it. And I will say right now I'm working as a server in a restaurant. It's not the most amazing job. It's not something I'm going to stay at forever. But I'm not, working my ass off in order to do this full time. Because really, when you look at it all the way down the road to being on my deathbed, the thing that matters is not, was I able to monetize it? Was I able to make these types of videos and work on my book every single day for 6 hours, 12 hours a day? Was it worth the hustle? I'm doing that stuff anyway. The fact that whether I make money or not off of doing this is completely irrelevant. And I should say irrelevant because I have that source of income. So I guess if I'm a proponent of anything right now, it's just make the work. I know in the past, especially if you kind of look at the episodes I've made on Purple Elephant Radio, it's a lot of stuff related to, how do you make your brand stand out? How can you monetize this stuff? And it's very obviously a reflection of what my worldview of that creating stuff was at the time. And clearly that's what this moving forward is. It's a different mindset. Not better or worse, but just different. So again, maybe this was a little bit of a ramble. This is the first video episode where I'm not able to look at notes the whole time. I didn't even have a structure for this episode. So the video is going to improve. Not just technically, but I'll probably come with an outline on the next episode. But ultimately, for this first video episode, I just wanted to get this simple point across. That it's the creating part that matters, not what comes of it. And again, the quote that has really been glued in my mind recently: you have the right to the work, but not the fruits of the work. And shit, I wish I had the full thing. It goes a little bit longer. Okay, so I wanted to read the full Bhagavad Gita quote because I think it goes a little bit more in depth, and it basically goes, you have the right to work, but for the work's sake only. You have no right to the fruits of work. Desire for the fruits of work must never be your motive in working. Never give way to laziness either. I really like that last part. Never give way to laziness either. It's basically saying there's two ends of the pendulum. The ultra ambitious, always thinking about what's coming in the future, and the couch potato. And we as creatives, I as a creative moving forward, want to be in that middle ground. Creating for creation's sake. Making videos for the sake of making videos, for the joy of it. That's all I have on this. I want to thank you for either watching or listening. And stay tuned on a lot of things coming up, but for now, most likely it'll be another podcast episode in the coming weeks. Thanks. If you like this episode, it would mean a hell of a lot if you rated it on Spotify, on iTunes, left a nice review. Thank you.